So my name is Caitlin Preston.
My name is Bailey Galisi.
My name's Addie Fonan.
And we're in the Missouri State Athletic Training Program, and we're going to be discussing chapters 2 and 3 of the Extreme Ownership book for leadership. Okay, so chapter 2. What do you guys think about it?
I liked the overall concept. It kind of made me reflect on my own. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm a bad leader sometimes.
I agree. I was the same way. I hadn't thought about it in the ways that they brought it up, with the teams and how it could be.
Maybe we should explain that chapter a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
So I'll explain chapter 2. So basically, they started out with Leaf. He decided to explain one of his experiences as a Navy SEAL instructor in one of their training camps. They make their SEAL people go through. Was one of their first things. It's called BUDS training, and they basically are split up into teams where they have a team instructor, and then that instructor is responsible for their team, along with getting the orders from their head instructors and relaying it to their team. And they basically are, if their team isn't performing as well as they need to be, or if they are struggling behind, they're going to be the ones that are responsible for everything. So Leaf goes on to explain how some teams are really good and they always turn out on top and they always go beyond what they're always asked to do, and then some teams will really struggle. They'll always come in last. And what he found was that it wasn't necessarily the team's fault that they were underperforming. It was mostly the leader, and how it really came down to, was the leader being effective or not? And if they were being ineffective, everyone was fighting, they weren't taking charge, they were blaming their team and not themselves. Their team ended up struggling a lot. So, okay. So, basically one of the examples he gave was there was a week where there was a team that was always winning and there was a team that was always losing. The winning team, they had a really awesome leader. He took control. He always made sure that everyone was communicating and not fighting. He took complete charge if anything ever went wrong. And then there was a team that was always losing, and they just thought that their leader, who they put in charge of that group, was never taking charge. He always blamed his other team. He thought that it wasn't his fault. He was just given a bad team. So to show that it was the leadership style that was struggling and not the team itself, they decided to switch the two leaders. And what ended up happening was the team that was always losing began to win because they had the good leader. And yeah.
Yeah,
So there was that. Yeah.
They specifically, they did another race right after that. Mm-hmm. And the team that was the worst team with the bad leader now had the good leader. They were still the worst team, they thought, but they actually ended up winning. And the good team before that had the good leader that now had the bad leader, they came in second because they were still good because the good leader that was previously with them, and so we instilled good leadership.
Yeah, it was kind of like the idea they mentioned about how good leadership is contagious.
Yeah.
And if you set up a good way of working together, it's going to continue on even if the leader is to fall or to leave. They can still keep going, and that's kind of what happened with this group, as they were still able to carry it through and finish the race and still do really well, but they had a different leader and may have not been as good, but they had the leadership from the previous leader still working in the team, so it worked out for them, and they were in competition the rest of the race, like it said.
Yeah.
So,
do you guys ever think that there was a time where you felt like you were dealt a bad hand with as far as the team goes, and thought, I'm not bad at leading this group of people, they're just bad at whatever they're doing?
Definitely. I think a lot of times working in groups, it can be kind of difficult in general to kind of get along with everybody, or to feel like everybody's doing their part.
Yeah. So
you can kind of struggle with people getting their stuff done, and then you feel like, oh, it was their fault they didn't get it done, not my fault. I told them what they needed to do, they just didn't do it. But I think it goes along with this book and how you still have to follow up and you still have to work with these people continuously and not just leave it in the dust and do this, get it done, whatever. It's you want to help them. You need to make sure that you're still leading them, that you're still motivating them and keeping them going. Kind of whatever was said in the book. There was a quote that I really liked that says, "It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate," which goes along with, like, you can preach 1,000 things. You can tell them to do this, do this, do this. But it doesn't mean that they're going to do it to the level that you want them to do. They're going to just do it how they think. So, like, if you're going to tolerate their level and it's not to the level you want, then, yeah, it's not going to be good results. You're going to struggle with it.
Absolutely. And just with our positions as students and as, yeah, we still are students, but we're still kind of in charge of these athletes. And if we do tolerate what they give you, then they're never going to, or I guess, hang on, what was it? So it's what you preach, it's not what you tolerate.
Right.
If they keep only performing at this under satisfactory level and they're like, okay, like I'm going through this warm-up you're telling me, but I'm not doing it how I should be doing, I'm not getting any better, then, and you keep tolerating it, they never are going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to
keep it at
yeah.
it. Keep it going, right?
I think that's where it relates to athletic training the most,
Yeah.
for sure. Because you can say to your preceptor or whatever, I told them how to do it right. It's not my fault they're doing it wrong. But that would be tolerating them doing it wrong. If you see them doing it wrong, then correct it.
Right, yeah. Like, that happens a lot, like, at performance, like, in performance at health tracks, we've had that a lot. It's like, you can see somebody doing it bad, and, like, they may be doing 3 things bad, but you only fix the one, you still see the other 2, and you don't do anything about it. It's like, well, you're telling them how to do it, but you're not fixing everything you could, so you're not getting to the best of their ability. And, like, that's our job, is, like, to help them get back to where they want to be. But if you're not taking every step to do so, they're not going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the whole entire title of the chapter is No Bad Teams, Only Bad Leaders. If you're not leading them, you're going to be the bad leader, even though they're part of the team. So I think it's just going to bring everybody down further, like it was talking about.
Absolutely. I also think that I just thought it was funny because as I keep reading this book, I can see leaders throughout our program or people that are in charge. I'm like, man, like, if you would just read this book, like, we could just have such a, like, just a much more effective program.
Yes.
And I just think it's so interesting how it's so easy to blame others or, like, oh, like, this class it's not a good class, or they're just not as smart as the other classes, or stuff like that. But then if you just think, you're like, well, how are they supposed to know? Like, if you tolerate their behavior now and you never, like, allow them the opportunities to get better, or you never be like, hey, like, this isn't okay, like, you need to be doing that, like, everything at this level, then they're never going to get better. And that reflects back on you as their leader rather than them.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was very interesting.
I know. I'm the same way. Like, I keep, like, reading this book and keep going through, and I'm like, I relate it to myself and, like, how poor of a leader I am compared to, like, this, and, like, it makes me learn. But I'm also thinking, like, how other people are acting and, like, how they do it. And I'm like, I really want to recommend this, like, to so many people. Just like, read this. You'll learn so much. Yeah. And it's just, like, you'll learn about yourself so much more and, like, what you should be doing that could help benefit everything you're doing.
Absolutely.
So
I'm just glad I'm not in charge of people's lives.
like, yeah, like, they are.
Yeah.
Like, some of these are kind of intense that I don't think I could make it through the same way they are. And, like, especially with the examples they're giving with, like, the companies having to deal with it.
That's a good point. I think we should talk about that next.
Okay.
So after they share the story, they give, like, the principle of what happened, and then they show the application to the business world, and they give a specific example of when they've gone to a company and applied this specific rule. So this one is where this one was the funny one, I thought.
Funny?
This is where he gets fired, right?
I'm trying to... I thought that was chapter.
Yes. So they go into this.
Yep, we're good.
This business where the CEO called him in to come talk to these people that he called Lethan, and he meets with all the department leaders and tells them this story that we just explained, and talks to them about how they need to own up to all their mistakes for the whole team and lead the team because it's all on them basically. So. As he was explaining this, he got a lot of, like, pushback from one of the department heads, and that was the chief technology officer.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. And he was basically saying, what we're doing is not working because it's just a bad market and all this, blah, 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 blah. And not saying, like, it was how he was leading or...
He wasn't taking extreme ownership like the book was saying to do.
At all, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he said the tortured genius quote. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, like, the tortured genius is, like, they may know, like, a ton of things. Like, they may be very, very smart, but tortured in the sense that they can't, like, go any further. They can't be a leader. They can't take control. They can't take, like, ownership of what they're doing. So, like, the tortured genius is kind of going along with that, and how, like, you can be really smart, you can be great at all of this stuff, but you're tortured because you can't go any further. You can't take that final step and like be a great leader and lead people. So it kind of holds you back, and in this sense can get you fired.
Yes, which is what happened. He left the company, and then he called the CEO back the next week, and he said everyone's taking on this extreme ownership like very seriously, and they're taking it great, and one guy wasn't, and we let him go, and we got a new one who had a completely different attitude, and it's really helping the company.
And I feel like that also relates into the whole it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate, because he had to go directly to the CEO and be like, listen, like, if you don't get your CTO officer on board, then you're going to let down your entire team.
Mm-hmm.
So he let him go, and he got one that was totally on board, and it worked out.
And I think, like, relating this back to, like, our clinicals, I think it's important to realize whenever something may not be working out for everybody and be able to, like, step up and do something about it. Maybe that's even just bringing it to the attention of them and being that leader and taking advantage of the opportunity to help them grow. And if they can't grow, maybe they need to find something else that they can do, or even try and teach them, and then maybe find something that works better for them that may not be so dramatic and, like, slowly get there as well.
Yeah.
So.
True.
Absolutely.
Okay, so chapter 3.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, chapter 3, I'll talk about that one. It was titled Believe, and this one was by Jocko. So he starts telling a story. Jocko is like the head. He's even higher than Lee.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yes.
I'm not sure the technical term. He's the high guy.
Yeah.
And so they were out in battle, obviously.
Yeah.
And he got orders from higher up, wherever the higher up was, like the Pentagon, wherever it's actually coming from, that he didn't think made any sense at all. They wanted them to fight alongside the Iraqi army soldiers, which, compared to our Navy SEALs, it's like night and day. We have everything. We have all the best equipment, highly trained, most trained in the whole army. And then we have these guys who are only fighting for a paycheck, or they may not even be fighting for any reason at all. They have awful equipment. Some of their guns don't even work. They don't have any armor, anything like that. So just night and day. And he's confused because he says, we train with these guys. We all train the same way. We all know and trust each other completely. And we don't want these guys who have been known to get Navy SEALs killed or just make the mission go bad working alongside us. Like, we don't want to work with them. So he had to tell all of his other leaders that were below him for all the squads he had to tell them this news, and before he could tell them, he had to try to understand it himself, even though his first reaction was absolutely not. So he sat and he thought about it. He kept coming to the question of why are they wanting this from us? Like, there's a reason they're telling us to work with these guys. Why? And basically, he thought it through and he figured out that if we don't work with them and teach them how to fight, then we're never going to be able to leave Iraq, because we're going to have to stay there and defend it for them. They won't be able to defend their own country. So he figured that out, and he went and he told all of his guys, who also had the same reaction he did at first, like, no, we're not doing that. They're going to get us killed. We just won't go on any missions. And then he explained to them the why. And he's like, how can we expect them? He explained the whole thing to them, and they slowly were like, okay, I get it. So basically he ended up telling them to, like, if you guys want to go on any missions and actually, kill the bad guys and do what we're supposed to do here, then we have to work with them. So they accepted it pretty much.
That worked well. For this one, the main, title, we'll call it, of the chapter was Believe. And I think in general that this chapter is very important. As a leader, you have to, believe in what you are being told, as well as, what you believe. You have to trust yourself. And I think that really applies to, our clinicals and everything like that, because, if you don't believe in yourself, the patient, whoever, is not going to believe in you. You're not going to be able to get them to do anything, or they may do it, but they're not going to be, fully trusting you. They're not going to be able to come back and be like, want to be there. So I think it's
Oh,
important
yeah.
that you have that trust and that you answer the why that they may have.
Exactly. Which they have a lot with us, with some of the funky stuff we do.
Yeah.
Like when they're
Oh,
complaining
yeah.
about their anterior knee pain and we poke on their
Poking the
neck.
shoulder.
Right,
Like,
yes.
oh, you have a spot up here. If I poke on this spot, your knee will feel better. If they ask you why, you need to know why.
Definitely.
Oh,
Or
Or-
and you have to believe that why.
Yes.
You can't just be like, well, this is what they tell me in school.
Yeah.
You have to actually believe
You
it.
have to act
Yeah.
like a clinician. You can't act like a student. Especially being at Health Tracks when you have that older demographic in that population who still look at you as a young student and they're like, how are you supposed to help me? And you're like, oh, well, if we go through this functional movement screening or if we go through this certain type of like SFMA and I find that you have stuff with your neck but your knee hurts, like that's why. And then you have to go into like the whole fascial lines and you have to get down to like the nitty gritty. And if you can show them that you understand what you're doing, then they will absolutely be behind you 100%. And with therapy, it's not just you're fixing like their physical attributes. You're also, it's kind of like a mind game because everything's connected. Your whole nervous system, everything like that. Like if you can't get them to understand and like completely buy into what we're doing, then they'll never get better. And they'll always have like that roadblock up. And I just thought that was the most interesting part. That like, yeah, the whole belief thing. I
Yeah.
just thought it was really interesting. And
The-
this chapter was really interesting.
The why made me think of that TED Talk that we listened to in class about Apple and they're selling the why. Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's not, he's not just
Yeah.
looking at what they have to do and be like, okay, we're doing this. He's not looking at the what, he's looking at why are we doing this.
Mhm. Like,
Because with
yeah.
important stuff like that, you have to look at the why.
Yeah. The why is kind of like the benefit. Like, if you don't explain the benefit of what you're doing, then why are you doing it? Like, everybody
Right.
always asks you,
Why?
like, at clinicals, it's like, why? And you're like, well, this. But, like, if you don't believe that or if you don't answer that why,
Mhm.
then, like, why are you doing it? Like, with certain exercises, like, I know Karen and as well as Jim like to ask why a lot.
Yes.
Even though you know and they
Absolutely.
know why you're doing it, they're still going to ask you why to make sure that you believe you know why you're doing it. Because
Yeah.
if you don't believe it, you don't understand it, who's going to believe you? Who's going to understand you? Like, there's no point in doing it if you don't know the why behind it, or at least
And
understand
you're going to be an ineffective clinician.
Yes.
And there goes your whole practice.
Exactly.
Bam.
So the why brings us to when Jocko applied it to the business. Someone want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. So with this one, it was a company, and they had a new compensation plan that they had for their salespeople. So it was like the way they were going to get like all of their money or like their salary basically. And so with this, they had a new compensation plan, and it was brought towards the leaders of the group from the CEO. So the CEO passed it down to these people and were like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how it's going to change. Explain it and make sure that everybody else would understand it. So with this, they had the issue of the leaders didn't understand what the CEO was trying to get across. So they struggled with that, and a lot of people were very against it. They didn't understand. They kept asking why, but they didn't take the step towards the CEO to ask why. It ended up being Jocko who had come into this company to help them, and he asked the CEO, and eventually it got back to the CEO to get her to explain it to her leaders to fully understand what their compensation plan was and like why they had brought it forward. And so this compensation plan was kind of to help weed out those that weren't doing well, but also in the end benefit everybody more so that they could have a better business and keep growing and keep managing well. And with it, eventually, once the CEO had come into the leaders and explained to them and got them to believe in this plan and got them to understand the why, it eventually worked out and everybody was good, and they had realized that all they needed to do was go in and talk to the CEO, ask the question why if they didn't understand it, as well as the CEO needed to understand that maybe they don't get it, and that even though they've been working with her and know what she wants, they still need to go in and ask why, and she needs to be able to understand why they don't get it and be able to understand it and make them understand it.
Yeah, it was on both. He explained in the end that it was on both parties.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just her fault for not explaining to them why. If you are working at a business and you want to know why, you have to ask.
Definitely. You can't just leave it all on that person and be like, they should know I don't know it.
Exactly.
You need to be able to have the confidence or the guts, we'll say, to go to that person and say, I don't know. I don't get it. It's like a lot of times with like clinicals, they'll
Yeah.
say, go do this. And you may go do it, but you're like, why? Why am I doing this? What does this benefit? Like,
Yeah, I do that.
me too. There are a lot of times I've done that. Like, then they always ask, like, do you know what you're doing? And it's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, but like, do you know why you're doing it? What is this doing
Two
to help?
different things.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
exactly. So it's kind of interesting to see how much this is like connecting and applying, as well as like with something that's totally different in like a business compared to like clinicals, like with healthcare and working with people. So it's been really interesting to learn that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even back to clinicals and the whole how he explained, or like how nobody wanted to speak up because they were afraid that they were going to act stupid.
Yes.
Same with clinicals. We never really want to speak up because you don't want your preceptor to think you're dumb. Or like,
Yeah.
oh, I got a bad student this semester. Like, she doesn't know what she's doing. But like, you have to, like, we also have to realize that we're never going to learn if we don't ask why.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
And like that's happened a lot with me, especially like this semester at Health Tracks. It's like they always ask like the why, or maybe I don't ask the why, but then like my preceptor, he'll ask and be like, why are you doing this? Like, do you know why you're doing this? Or like, I plan something, be like, why are you doing it? And be like, well, this is why. And he's like, do you understand why you're doing it? Like, we may have done it, and I'm just repeating what he's done, but I need to understand the full effect of like why it's doing it. So it's been really helping me grow that
absolutely.
and like believe in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
back to that.
Okay. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.